Hey guys, this is Joshua Howell with Nerfherders. I just got out of seeing Terminator Dark Fate and I wanted to talk about it. We'll probably get into more detail and probably a review with the podcast with the other guys, but since they haven't seen it yet and since I've been seeing a lot of craziness around this film, I figured I'd do a video in defense of Terminator Dark Fate. In defense of the name, probably not, because that's kind of a stupid name, right? Terminator Dark Fate. It's not as stupid as Terminator Genesis or Genesis or whatever that last one was supposed to be. Is Terminator Dark Fate as good as Terminator 2? Absolutely not. Is it as good as Terminator 1? Absolutely not. However, it's a pretty good film. I actually liked it. And, you know, I've been listening to a lot of the reviewers that I follow, Grace from Beyond the Trailer, Jeremy Johns, and some other ones. And I get why they don't like it, but I don't agree. And so that's why I'm making this video. Okay, so Terminator 1 came out in 1984. Terminator 2 came out in 1991. So it's about a 7-year difference. It was a perfect time for a sequel to the Terminator to come out. You had some time for special effects, to kind of upgrade in the industry so you could have that awesome villain in Terminator 2. Terminator 1 had its time in the sun, so it got around the world. It had a following. So it was a great time for a sequel to that movie, and Terminator 2 delivered. It's a fantastic film. It's one of the best sequels of all time, if not the best sequel of all time. So, a question on everyone's mind is this movie, Terminator Dark Fate, which is being sold as the official sequel, the official third film, they're forgetting about T3, Rise of the Machines, they're forgetting about Terminator Salvation, they're forgetting about Terminator Genesis. This is supposed to be the official sequel to Terminator 2. So the question is it a good sequel? It's good. Is it perfect? No. Is it great? I think it's as good as it could be. Because here's the deal, folks. The perfect time to make a sequel to Terminator 2, the 1991 film Terminator 2, would have been back in the 90s. Would have been when Linda Hamilton was younger. Would have been when Edward Furlong was younger. That would have been the time to do it. Okay, you had great characters. Schwarzenegger was younger. Everybody looked good. They looked young. A time to continue their story would have been back then, and they didn't do that. I think the next Terminator film was in 2003. So they had a different actor for John Connor. They said that Sarah Connor died, I think, of cancer. So they brought back Schwarzenegger for that film, but that was it. They kind of just did away with the characters and the legacy that they had built up in those first two films. And, T3 was kind of corny. T4 or whatever, Salvation didn't have any of those characters returning, or at least the actors playing those characters. So again, we were trying to connect with the same character, but a different face to it, and a different era and whatnot, and it just didn't work. They brought Schwarzenegger back for Genesis, and they played around with time again, and they did a lot of stuff, recreating some of the scenes from T1 and T2, and that didn't really work out. It was just kind of a dumb film. It wasn't that good. And then they severely went crazy with John Connor, turning him into like a hybrid type thing. There's a mountain of reasons why those films didn't work. But the main thing is you had these great characters in Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And then late 90s, give it 5-6 years till T3, that would have been the perfect time to bring Linda Hamilton back, to bring Edward Furlong back, and to bring Schwarzenegger back if you needed to, and really continue their story. And we didn't get that. So by the way, this is spoilers. If you didn't already know this is a spoiler video. I'm gonna just go into it. So T whatever this is, Terminator Dark Fate starts out after Terminator 2. You've got young Linda Hamilton and young Edward Furlong. They're somewhere on a beach somewhere outside of America. They've been de-aged with the same technology, that we're seeing in other films like the MCU films or whatnot, and it looks really good. John Connor is still young. Sarah Connor is still young. They seem to have been relaxing a bit. They're on a beach. Sarah's having a drink. John's up at the bar trying to flirt with this girl. He's young. They're relaxing. And a T-800 Schwarzenegger Terminator comes up and kills John. Just guns him down on the spot, shotgun to the chest. And he walks right by Sarah Connor, and she doesn't realize it in time. And of course, she's not, carrying around a footlocker of guns, so she can't stop him on the spot. He just kind of throws her to the side, kills the target, and leaves. And that's how the film starts. And you know what? A lot of people are pissed about that. They're saying it shits all over the franchise. It shits all over the legacy. Here's my defense of that scene. I would have said the exact same thing if that scene came out in a movie in the 90s. We had these two great films, and I wanted more of those characters. So if Terminator Dark Fate came out in 1998 and this is how the film started, I would have been pissed. I would have been like, how dare you do that when, we could have had so much more from these characters. But it's not 1998. In fact, it's 21 years later, it's 2019. We can't have that film anymore. That time has passed. Edward Furlong is still alive, but, he's not acting in roles like this anymore. We do have a legacy character still around. We've got Linda Hamilton, and I don't know if you've seen the promotional pics for this, but she is boss in this film. She's ripped. She's in good shape. And, the studio really has one of two options. Either really put this thing underground for a long time and reboot it so you can do 3 films. So you can grow with a new Sarah Connor. You can grow with a new John Connor, and you can go through T1 and T2 and then have a 3rd film. They can do that, or they can do a sequel to T2 with an older Sarah Connor and have a reason why John Connor isn't there. Because, let's just face it, we're not going to get Furlong back for this. This was the best way to do it. To bring in somebody new, somebody that Sarah Connor could decide that she needs to protect, give her purpose again, and put it into that character. I understand that the world's a big world, but you can't have, clearly you can't have a really good Terminator film without Linda Hamilton. So if you're going to bring her back, you have to have a reason why John isn't there. You have to have a reason why, the supposed leader of the Resistance at one time is no longer in the franchise, and, it was easier to kill him off. And then as to the complaints of, well, why weren't they ready? Well, they thought they won. And I think if anything, the same argument can come into play. It's a big world, they can't be on guard all the time. If anything, the franchise has shown us is that the Terminators won't stop. And you can only get lucky so many times, Sarah Connor barely survived the first film. They barely survived the second film. And let's face it, by the end of the second film, John wasn't this amazing, military-centric kid. He didn't have strategy. He wasn't smart. He was still making dumb decisions in the final minutes as he was trying to, make sure that his friend, the Terminator, was okay and stuff like that. He almost got killed so many times in the last 20 minutes of that film. So, sure. We could have had a Terminator 3 where John and Sarah were just buff, and all they did was train, and they were ready for anything, and they were hiding in a bunker somewhere. But they thought they won. They really thought they won. All the chips were destroyed. All the Terminators were destroyed. 1996 came and went, and D-Day did not happen. So they thought they won. So they were relaxing just a little bit. and you relax just a little bit. You know, in normal life, when you're not being hunted by Terminators, you could die. So I don't think it's unrealistic that they made a mistake and John died. So, you know, I don't hate that scene as much as everybody else. Again, if this was in the 90s and that was the opening scene to the third film with these characters, I would have been pissed. But all these years later, over 2 decades later, if you're gonna bring Sarah Connor back, you gotta close that part of her life. So in that case, it's acceptable and it made sense. And you know what? The other part of it is that scene looked great. Young John Connor looked great. Young Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor looked great. Did Schwarzenegger look? He still kind of looked a little rubbery, but it's okay, I guess, because he's a Terminator, you know. He didn't look as great as the other two, but those two looked really good. And so it was ballsy, but I appreciated that scene starting it off. And then once we got past that, it fast forwarded to the future. And we've got our new character that's going to be hunted and our new person sent from the future that's here to protect her. You know, instead of a Kyle Reese, it's another soldier who's been augmented with, you know, more strength, more speed, some, you know, mechanics inside, some, you know, computer recognition software inside of her. She's got this beefed up metabolism. Basically, she's there to combat a Terminator, and as long as she has drugs to keep her going, she can do it for a long time. Otherwise, she's kind of like a quick, spur-of-the-moment type option. And she comes back to find and protect Danny, who is apparently vital in the future. And thus, you know, this starts over. So, you know, it's kind of a soft reboot in that now we've got a new person. You know, the whole John Connor storyline is done. In fact, Skynet is done. They stopped Skynet, but something else eventually happened. You know, if we were on, that's not a big deal to me either. If we were on the verge of Skynet and we stopped that, that means we're on the verge of whatever the alternative Skynet is, you know? If someone stopped Nike from happening, does that necessarily mean they stopped Adidas? No. So, you know, there's another version of Skynet called Legion that eventually happened. A little later, but it eventually happened. And so Judgment Day came. It just came, you know, further in the future than we thought, and now they feel that this Danny girl is going to grow up to be one of their biggest factors in the resistance, and so they want her dead. So they send a Terminator that's kind of a mix between the Terminators we've seen in the past, liquid form and metal form, and now it can be like both at the same time. And the next like maybe 15 minutes are just pure action as this Terminator cannot be stopped, just keeps on going, and the girl that is sent back to protect Danny, Grace, she is capable to a point of stopping him from getting just close enough to kill Danny. But even they, you know, get to a point where they're up against the railing on this highway and they got the Terminators on either side of them. And the only way they survive is Linda Hamilton shows up and saves the day. Just enough saves the day. Doesn't kill this Terminator because this Terminator's, you know, an upgrade from the last ones, but saves the day, gets them off that highway, and the story goes on. So her Linda Hamilton's entrance as Sarah Connor into the movie is the same entrance we get in the trailer. It's awesome. She's awesome. She looks awesome. She is what you would think that character would be all these years later. She's bitter. She's mean. She's tough. She gets annoyed easily. She doesn't want to explain herself to you. She's on a mission. And, you know, she feels like she's earned that mission, and she realizes that Danny's a target, and that this Grace girl could be, you know, could be an ally, and so she, you know, teams up with them to protect Danny, and so that's kind of that's the basis of the film. So how does Schwarzenegger come into play with this film? Well, that T-800 that came back to kill John in the beginning of the movie, he didn't stick around. He left, and it's their logic for what he's been doing all this time. Is that their story for that is that he walked the earth, I guess, until he came across something that he didn't agree with or he didn't like or whatever. And it was basically a woman with an abusive husband who was abusing her and her son. And he saved the son and the mother, and they kind of became a family. He became a stepdad to that son and a husband to that mother. It wasn't a sexual relationship, which is interesting, and they just kind of grew together. And he grew a conscience, and that would be an interesting film. Whether or not they could sell that in a film, but they wanted to sell that to you in a 2-minute conversation. That over time he grew to become more human. The T-800s were designed to mimic and mimic humans as much as possible, so that they could gain your trust, so that they could infiltrate and kill. And so with that logic, he learned so much that he grew a conscience and decided to be good. With that, he also grew a guilt for killing John Connor. And so what he's been doing for the last 20-something years, 20 plus years, he's been sending text messages to Sarah Connor. She doesn't know who they're coming from, with a time, a date, and coordinates of Terminators coming from the future, so that she could go there and kill them. He's not going to go kill them, but he's giving her a purpose. He found purpose in protecting and taking care of this mother and her son. He wanted Sarah to have a purpose. So he's sending her text messages for where the Terminators are going to come from, so that she could hunt them and kill them. And that's what she's been doing all this time. Whoever they're coming after, I don't know. They're not coming from Skynet anymore. They're coming from Legion. But that's how she comes across Danny and Danny's protector Grace, is because she got the coordinates. And so eventually they all meet up with Schwarzenegger. They find this. Sarah's not on board. This is the guy that killed her son. She wants him dead. She's not buying this whole, civilian Terminator type routine. But she has always been a tactical person. She's always been a strategic person. And as long as he appears to be on their side, for now, he's an advantage. So she agrees to let him join the team, with the caveat that she's going to kill him once it's all done. Once they get this bad Terminator destroyed, she's going to finish off this other Terminator, whether or not he's good. Kind of similar to T2. And so the rest of the movie is just action upon action upon action. Pretty satisfying action. It was neat to see Grace and everything that she could do. She's constantly having to pump medicine into herself, otherwise her metabolism overheats her and she just basically becomes useless. But when she is, when she is all drugged up and everything, she can be pretty awesome, and formidable against the Terminator. Again, is this film perfect? No. I do think they dropped the ball. There's a scene where they need to get an EMP from somebody in the military, and Sarah has a guy on the inside, and this black major shows up. And at first I'm like, okay, he's in the Air Force, he's working with technology, he's black, he's gotta be, he looks kind of, he's not super young, but he could be young, Is this the Dyson kid? Is this the boy that she freaked out when they broke into the home and explained to his dad everything about the Terminators in Terminator 2? It wasn't. which is kind of sad because that would have been a cool thing. But again, we don't have to have everything connect. So yeah, that was kind of a ball that they dropped that could have been cool, but does that mean the film sucked? No. The logic with the Terminator, you know, you're going to have, you're going to want one more film with Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton. And so whatever logic they had to do to get them back on the screen together, you know, it could have been a worse logic than what they gave us. If you want to dive deeper into why that logic is a little fishy, it would be was there another T-800 sent back to kill John and not the T-1000 that we got in, you know, Terminator 2? I mean, the short answer could be, well, they wanted to send someone back that would, you know, John would recognize, okay, but the, you know, T-1000 could have made himself look like the T-800. Also, if they stop Skynet, then what sent back this next one, you know, another way to get around that would be like, well, maybe they sent back a ton, and it just took this one extra long to get to them. He was the backup, and just took him forever to find them on the beach and kill him. You know, that's any movie with time travel. You're going to go down that rabbit hole of logic. And so it's just best not to. You know, you could do that with the first two films, honestly. So, for all those people who are saying that this movie's terrible, that it shits on the legacy of the franchise, that, you know, how dare they do this to John Connor and stuff like that, here's the hard truth. The legacy of this franchise was not Edward Furlong. He was in one film, he was interesting, but the legacy is with Schwarzenegger and, more importantly, with Linda Hamilton. Sarah Connor is the legacy character that we all should care about, and she is brought back in stellar form. She is amazing in this movie. She gets the screen time she deserves. She gets the character development she deserves, and I want to see more of it. I want to see more of her. I want a sequel to this. I want to see her and Danny like we should have seen her and John. We didn't get that, but now we can. So this movie sets us up for what we could have got back in the 90s with the T3. We could have that continuation, that time between now and Judgment Day in the sequel to Terminator Dark Fate. And this film does great in setting that up. So, again, is it perfect? No. Is it better than the last one? Yes. Is it better than the one before that? Yes. Is it better than the one before that? Yes. It is the best sequel we could have gotten to T2 in 2019. In the 1990s, would this have been great? Aside from, you know, the fact that the graphics are amazing and everything, no. This story would have been a shitty thing to do to that franchise. But over 20 years later, this film is the best sequel we could have gotten and the best way to set up further adventures in this franchise. So I would suggest you go see it. I really liked it. I hope we get more of it. I'm very thankful that we got more of Sarah Connor because she's a badass in this film. So that's all I have to say for now. Hopefully we'll talk about this more with the Nerfherders. I'd like to go back and forth with some of those guys. So yeah, thanks for watching.